Great. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am Sudhir Joshi, VP Strategic Partnership at 𝐷𝐠𝐝, and I'll be your host for this panel at 𝐷𝐠𝐝Con. Good to have you all with us, and on day two, I hope you had a great time on day one. Quick ask before we begin: do post your takeaways on LinkedIn and X. Tag us and use hashtag #𝐷𝐠𝐝Conf so rest of the community can follow the conversation. So let's get started. Almost every enterprise now has an agentic engineering win, a team that shipped code faster, a workflow that just got automated, a pilot that impressed the leadership. But far fewer have turned those wins into how the organization actually builds and tests software. Scaling is where real validation begins. Governance across hundreds of teams, uneven engineering maturity, legacy estates, and workforce being asked to change how it works faster than most change programs ever move. And to answer this, we had an amazing panel today with us who have managed it at the scale, introducing in alphabetic order Dror, a close friend from Amdocs Studio, CTO and Head of Quality Engineering Studio at Amdocs; Mhahesh, Head of Quality Intelligence for North America at Zensar Technologies; Nagendra, VP of Solutions Consulting for BFSI and Quality Engineering at Hexaware; Richa, AVP for Digital QA at GlobalLogic, now Hitachi; and Vikul Gupta, CTO at QualityAI, formerly Qualitas. Thank you so much for taking time out. Welcome to the panel. And I would love to start with few questions. And my first question is, we'll start with the ladies in the room, lady in the room, Richa. One question, and I'm sure when you step into the boardroom and those discussion in front of the customer, that in the pre-agentic era, the model was simple. More scope meant more people, and the pyramid of talent delivered it. Which assumption from that era has been the hardest to tackle, and what has replaced it, given the agentic scenario?
Okay, so my point of view, yeah, that there is a myth going on around where we are saying that we can replace uh, people with agent, and we can say actually that it is the assisting actually, which we can do that with the help of human. So if you say that how we are dealing with it currently, with the help of agents, we are just trying to build the use cases and we are just leaving the operating model behind. And that's why if you see it, that scaling it will becoming very difficult. And that's why the replacement, according to me, thinking about that replacement of the people with the bots is very difficult because the confidence level is not there. And that is all I can think of.
So I'll have Draw's point of view on the same question.
Thanks, Sudhir. First of all, pleasure being here for respective panel. So look, I'll try to keep it short also. I think the main assumption that was there for years is that capacity equals headcount. Okay, so for years that was the equation. In the new era of agentic AI, that what we call unit of capacity is changing significantly. Because the unit of capacity now is not just headcount. The unit of capacity is the human expertise, the actual agents, the automation, and the reusable intelligence that you bring in.
Yeah.
Predominantly, when you change the unit of capacity, the pyramid of testing is also shifting, right? Everybody goes up. Everybody goes up, which is also changing down the road. So that assumption of capacity equals headcount is fundamentally changing everything around, especially the commercial model that services are providing to anyone. Um, so so that commercial model turns into an outcome-based model, and that unit of capacity is the main change. So the biggest change that we see around that is that it's not about replacing people with agent, and I'm very much connected to what Richard just mentioned. It's not about people replacing people with agents. It's replacing the headcount as a unit of capacity.
Super. Vikul, you've been the front runner on the whole engineering and quality engineering tie up there. What's your view on this? Okay, so I think Vikul had
Maybe I can
little.
just
Yeah, go on.
just adding to what was said previously, right? Uh, I think the biggest change will be in the impact on the commercial models, the pyramid part, right? Look at this way, right? Invariably today in the service industry, we charge based on number of hours, right? We might model as a fixed price or a fixed capacity, but finally it's a human, right? If X is what we charge per hour, uh, we have been trying to actually bring in the optimization so the effort comes down and eventually the X also comes down. Now, going forward, the expectation would be now that X will have two components, right? If you want to put it as X1 and X2. X1 will be your human, and X2 would be your AI tokens,
Mm.
right? For eventually, for customers, it shouldn't really matter, right? There will be time where customers would come back and tell you deliver the outcomes to me, efficiencies, where you take the cost of AI. End of the day, you deliver it with whatever value that you're supposed to deliver with whatever price, but that price should include the human plus AI. I think it's a question of time where you would end up customers or even organizations would volunteer because end of the day you have to deliver value, right? And AI becomes a means to achieve it. So you have to bundle that price. You can't go back and say uh, tokens are consuming more cost, so I have to charge you more, right? That is something which all of us should be ready to accept and move on and come out with the pricing models, change our operating models, right, to bring in this into reality.
Thank you, Nagin. This is what I love about this panel, right? This is the reality on the ground. Hey, Vikul. Okay, so I think we will continue with the next question. Mahesh, you've been again, seeing these conversation, part of these conversations. We hear a lot about agentic adoption. Can you share an enterprise scale example where it genuinely changed how they build or validate those agents and software? And tell us what was the shift and what broke during that journey.
Absolutely, Sudhir. And first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be part of this wonderful group of panelists. An example that comes directly to my mind is for a large department store in America, right? Now, if I have to take what my co-panels were talking about a minute ago on how the industry has changed now, right? And if I were to tell today that in a quarter worth of planning where you had 1,500 epics, 15,000 user stories. And if I tell somebody that we were able to create the test assets where scenarios were written with 100% traceability, test cases, 80% consumable were already written, and your automation code with 70 to 80% usability was done even before the quarterly planning exercise was done, maybe 6 months before, people would have laughed at me, right? And that's what we were able to change for this department, right? When we started this agentic adoption within the QI, it took some time to establish the foundation for it, right? And once that foundation was done, we wanted to see how can QE become a front runner rather than being perceived as a bottleneck. And that's what we were able to achieve for them. But the number isn't the interesting part here. And I would rather spend time on what we had to break for us to achieve this, right? Test data provisioning became the binding constraint within weeks, right? The agents were able to generate, and it was able to do it faster than any provisioning process can feed them. And the moment the execution got cheap, data became the queue. And once we saw data, environments were immediately behind it, right? Same story, different resource. What had to change was the definition of done, right? And if the definition of finish cannot be changed, that becomes the immediate bottleneck, right? The honest lesson is that every bottleneck we cleared revealed the next one, right? We were not necessarily just accelerating the pipeline. You ended up discovering what that pipeline actually was, and most of them were not written for how the agentic UI cycle is going to be, right? And that was the momentum that we had to change for the exercise to be successful. Producing all these assets were all good, but in the sprint, if you're not able to use them at the pace that you are producing it, then there is no point behind it, right? And that's the real life example that I could report here, Sudhir.
Well, I mean, love to have Nagendra here because you kind of spoke about on the same point. Love to have a build-up view on that.
Absolutely. If you look at, I would broadly categorize the agentic AI adoption into two buckets, right? That's happening in the industry. One is AI for IT, right? Where each of us leverage AI to become more efficient in delivering our services, right? It could be software development, testing, DevOps, or whatever it is. Second one is, which is more the end customer's focus, is AI for business, where they want to leverage AI to ensure their business processes are more efficient, they automate, right? And eventually, AI for IT also becomes part of that larger exercise where we will be forced to use the AI in whatever services we deliver as part of the partnership. I want to take one customer case study and explain this, which is a combination of both. We had one of our airline customer who wanted to build a customer support chatbot, right? That primarily takes care of queries specific to any of these 12 areas. It could be baggage claim, flight cancellations, which is all real time, right? Booking changes, customer profile, right? And they had built an high complex agentic AI architecture with RAG and FAQ retrieval, all of those things, right? Which is multi-turn conversion handling with a lot of integrations with almost 15 backend systems, rules engine, trip, channel, proxy, everything, right? So when we went into the testing, to start with, we looked at from a functional testing point of view, support any kind of scenarios and all those things, looking at happy path, edge cases, uh, chatbot agents, looking at in terms of each of the areas. When we start getting into it, we realize that very soon it is not just testing of the functionality where what agents are supposed to do, right? We also have to look at what agents are not supposed to do. You would have come across some of these incidents with OpenAI and Hugging Face, where OpenAI went and actually did some things in the Hugging Face environment. And there is a good, I would say, uh, workbook created by Surge AI. If you guys just look for it, where they actually did an experiment of creating a enterprise and then actually testing different processes across HR and all those things. What comes is actually for us also the biggest thing was the completeness of the agent workflow, and that is where we started course correcting by bringing the focus of AI assurance, what we call or testing of AI. While we leveraged AI to become more efficient, I think the biggest thing that while we had talked about it, but the practical challenge was how do you test? How do you look for the observability layer, right? What kind of agent specific logs that I can analyze, right? All of that became very, very important for us. And that's a big, I would say, I wouldn't say course correction, but it's more in terms of bringing the focus back, where eventually what we will see is the traditional testing with respect to the functional will be continue to be there with using AI to become efficient. But I think the focus will also be more in terms of making sure that the governance part of it, the data part of it, and making sure that not just testing for what it's supposed to do, but also looking for what it should not do. Primarily because uh, the code that is built in the traditional world is deterministic, right? Somebody human writes the code and then the outcome is expected. Now with the agentic world where the the decisions happens in the real time, where you don't know what is happening, which agent is calling which agent, what influences they make. Very, very important to have a real time view on what is happening, continuous autonomous validation of agents, right? That's something which actually was the biggest discovery for us, and that's something we want to share.
Super. We'll move to our next question, and I'll Vikul, I hope I'm audible. Okay, cool. And we'll actually have this question for you. Um, so we heard about Hugging Face, and when you spoke about that conversational agent, right? It reminds me of Chipotle and Air Canada and Chevy support and some of the more fun stories. But actually, enterprises are rarely known at the pilot stage whether a program will scale, right? Because like Richa said earlier in our conversation, is a lot of experimentation is being done, and you're kind of partnering with them. But Vikul, for your experience across multiple engagement, what are those signals that tells you within first few engagements or implementation that this will not scale or will have some challenges when it goes to production?
Yeah, there are so many analyst reports, Sudhir, out there which talks about how majority of the pilots don't make to prod, and a lot of my clients have read that, and they ask. This is a very common question we get asked. So when we talk to them, our suggestion is to look for 5 signals. First, we have the right use case. Whatever you're trying to do, is that program tied to a real workflow or measurable business outcome? If that initiative, if that use case is only demonstrating that an agent can generate something impressive, it will always remain a pilot. Something to go in productions should have a clear owner, economic value, and an operation problem to solve. So use case is important. Second is, does it have the reliable context? That's where I see a lot of time people fail. Yes, we'll use ChatGPT, we'll use this model, that model, and it creates something. Can you use it? Does it know what is what? I'll just speak from a testing language perspective. What requirements you have? What existing test cases do you have? What kind of coverage do you have? Where is that context? So I think the context, the trusted data, the existing business rule, the permissions, historical knowledge, the integrated ecosystem your use case works in. I think if I have to say, of all the other ones I'm going to talk, weak context is one of the fastest way for a pilot to fail. This is the second. The third is verification is something which needs to be thought about and designed from the beginning. Your team needs to know how outputs, actions will be evaluated, what evidence must be retained, what is the threshold you have, and when you escalate to a human. That is going to be very important, because we cite examples, right? Like there was an example of a CIO firing all his developers and went completely to one, I won't name the company, but and that agent just deleted all the databases and the backup. They lost 9 months. So human in the loop is important. Richa talked about that in the first example. I think that is very, very important. So that is the third. Fourth, the operating model has to be clear. All through AI4 conference, we participated, right? It was clear, right? What is the role of humans there? It's not just to own the agent after deployment, including its performance, its cost, its security, its exceptions, and how do you continuously improve it? If ownership stops after the proof of concept, the program also usually stops. And the last one is, what is beyond that initial pilot, right? Most of the successful pilots which I've seen are where you start thinking about when it goes to production, right? What happens to orchestration, observability, governance, model access, continuous context improvement. I think that is important, right? So I think if you ask me, a simple test I ask the companies to deploy is, does the pilot prove only that the technology works, or does it prove that the enterprise can operate it safely, economically, and repeatedly? Do you have trust in this AI? Remember, a pilot just proves possibility, but a production requires ownership, evidence, economics, and repeatability. And all of that doesn't come without trust. So trust is, I keep on repeating that word because I think from a quality perspective, AI trust is where we are the guardians of. And that is what we can do from a quality perspective.
Great insights, Vikul. I think to your point, the whole idea of we now hear context rot, right? Too much context can also result in, and then we've been talking to multiple customers as well. Agent behave nice when you have it in a controlled environment. Plug your policy, plug your corporate systems, plug your financial system, and it can go anywhere. Dror, moving to you on the same question, and I was part of that partner day at the
Yeah,
Amdocs.
first of all, I echo what Vikul, we just mentioned. I don't want to repeat some of the stuff, but when people are speaking about those pilots, it needs to be an agentic programs that are going on signals. Let's differentiate between is the agents are working and doing what they should do, whether the program can scale. Today, when we push more and more a program, such a program, if we bring our own agent, I'm less looking into how impressive the agent can be. People coming with agents says they can do a lot of things. I'm looking into how the organization behave around that. And that's break into few signals. Okay, not 5 or 2 or 3, but I agree with what Vikul mentioned, but I'm looking into first, does that produce an outcome? Every program at the end of the day needs to produce an outcome that is measurable, not just semantics. Okay, so that's signal number 1, which is coming and saying, do we produce that outcome? The second thing, everybody speaks about program and workflows, and there is a big question, is it embedded in the workflow? Because at the end of the day, if you need to have someone on the ground that is moving away from the workflow to another AI tool, then you miss and that's why pilots are being demolished, right? And the last one to me, which is really important, and I echo what Vikul mentioned about the trust, but a different question about this. When I'm looking into the behavior of the organization around that program, there is a big question, does the organization is willing to trust it enough that it can do production and delegate those activities to the agents? If the organization is moving through that bridge, and that's the behavior around that pilot, that's the strongest signal you can get that that program goes to production. Okay, at the end of the day, to me, when it lands in production, it basically means not that the agent can do the work, because I think it's easy, but the most important thing, a successful program, and that the one that goes to production, is that the one that enterprise is willing to trust it. And again, trust, and I echo that. It's a very important item.
Super. Mahesh, you bought a successful implementation, in your previous example. Of course, there have been signals that build that trust and confidence that it's going in right direction. So we'd love to know, what are those signals that you captured, of course, other than what has been covered, and how many of those signals were really visible in the existing implementation that you just spoke about?
See, Sudhir, while I did speak about one of the implementations, I think Richa brought a fair point when she spoke about every organizations are now in that path of it's already being done, right? What next? The first signal that I would gently look for is the sponsor who is leading the implementation, right? Does he definitely have the authority to change the definition of that, right? Now, if the person doesn't have the authority to change what finished means in the organization, the pilot can never become a process, right? I mean, the pilot will become an excellent readout, will get a pat on the back, and then it will kind of die there, right? It will never be a technical indicator. Now, second one that I would gently look for is where is the budget coming from? Is it from innovation? If it is, it's still a demo, right? And we are not serious about taking it to production. We are thinking about it. Now, at the same time, if it is actually coming from the capital delivery budget, someone has actually decided to get the work done. And the source of money generally tells you more than the dollar value that is assigned to it, right? And third one probably is the most important one for me, is anyone measuring things that could actually embarrass them, right? Now, I've seen programs that only track velocity and how the programs are performing, right? Every sprint that you listen into, the ceremonies that you listen into, they're not worried about what the defects are, what kind of rework is there, how did the defect escape. Everybody is worried about, oh, my sprint velocity is getting impacted, right? Programs that actually track these matrices, which includes defects, rework, reviewer load, right? I think Nagendra and all the panel members here spoke about the human in loop, which is very important. And these matrices being tracked actually means they are managing a transition, because projects that tracks these matrices, these are the ones that could go wrong way fast, right? Now, underneath all three, if nothing uncomfortable had to change to make the pilot work, nothing has actually moved.
So, Vikul, I will, I mean, in fact, I'll have Vikul and Richa also comment on this. You've been very engineering first mindset, right? Like building platforms, frameworks has always been, thought process when you're kind of talking to and consulting your customers. Given the client's engineering maturities is quite uneven, what Mahesh said, right? Some people are doing it out of experiment and they don't have clarity. How do you really look at rolling out such a platform or program across that spread, and then as well as at that scale? And most importantly, which some of you touch base on, is how you keep it governed.
So I think like we have to apply the same engineering principles we have in the past, right? Like the fact that I'm going to borrow the term multi-speed IT when automation came in and so many things came in, right? Not everyone was at the same level of maturity, which is even true now. Process maturity, people maturity, exposure to tools, and so on. So I'm going to borrow that term and I'm going to say, when we talk about agentic platforms, they should be able to onboard multi-maturity teams. People who are AI aware, people who are AI fluent, people who are AI certified. Now, a lot of our customers are doing that, right? And I tell them, right, 4 or 5 step process, depending on where you are and what you want to do. I would start by creating a shared enterprise foundation. What will that foundation entail? Agent access, orchestration, security, observability, evaluation, knowledge management, context creation, and auditability. Why would I do that? Like, think of this like a hub, right? Like, I don't want individual teams and federated spoke teams creating this foundation components independently, because then that will create fragmented architectures, inconsistent controls, and you won't be able to audit, right? There's no standard. So once you have the hub and the enterprise foundation created, that's where, right, like you will start thinking about, right, like introducing graduated autonomy model. What I mean by that, right? The federated teams, the spokes, the lower maturity teams, they will start with introducing agents in an assistive mode, like Richa was talking about, right? Like, it's not replacing humans, it's about assisting humans, where it's assisting testers create test design, test cases, helping manual testers prioritize test cases, and so on. So that is one aspect. And then as the team matures, demonstrates performance and stronger controls, then the agents can move towards like on the loop for well-bounded tasks, greater autonomy. And this process can keep on repeating, right? Autonomy should be earned through evidence, not just because a pilot is successfully generated the outcomes. Then you talked about governance. I feel governance should be also federated, right? Like in the hub, we define the guardrails, the monitoring standards, the auditability, minimum evidence requirements, but then the engineering teams, the individual project teams, the spokes should be accountable for the use case, domain context, and outcomes, right? So this will, with this setup, right, hub and spoke, this will allow different teams to operate at a different speed without creating hundreds of disconnected agent environments. See, my whole goal is to standardize the platform and the controls, but allow the personalization of the journey towards fully autonomous agentic systems. You can't just jump from having no AI, no automation to totally agentic, autonomous based. So you have to gradually move. I would say 99.9% of customers who try to make that switch, just flipping a thing, failed. Richa.
Yeah.
So I mean, great point, Vikul, and I think to Richa, everything starts with that whole structure of data that builds the context, and then you build on top of that. So again, love to hear your point of view on.
Yeah. So what Vikul says and it's a very interesting question, and I love to answer it because a lot of customer coming back saying that, as Vikul mentioned, that they are not having a automation, but they want to have a automation intelligent layer, actually autonomous intelligent layer for their complete thing. So very interesting. But here, how we are implementing this to a scale, these platform is one, like we are creating a very good trust signal for the customer itself. We are saying that we are not going to create the agents for your use cases. We will create the platform for your complete workflow. Means normally what happens, customer comes back and says that I want to generate the test cases fast. Means I have a regression of around 5,000 test cases, and please create an agent actually who will solve my problem. But we are saying, okay, that's why, well, that's what it is. But we won't be creating the things only for your use case, which is that generation of the automation script. We will create a complete workflow where it is normally POCs are happy path, according to me. They are not covering the things like which say that happy path, what will be the area, what is the failure, how it will learn, and again give the complete mode. So definitely means how we are doing the implementation in the scaled thing is like we are saying we will create a workflow for you, which will be giving 5 or 6 areas actually for the trust signal, where we can say that what will be your outcome accuracy. Means what is the consistency actually, what is the success rate what you are having, what is the error rate, what is false positive, what is false negative is coming up, and what is the consistency and predictabilities we are able to bring it before we will really scale actually the organizational wise. Yeah. So definitely, as Vikul highlighted, that our the KPIs, what we are like doing it and calculating or measuring our success, actually that need to be changed. And third part is the traceability, that why the agent make a certain decision and whether it's a right or not, or whether it's a traceable. You should able to trace why the particular agent have taken that decision. Means decision, it should be well driven by the evidence with the test result, and then defect, and then the risk and the business rule. So these all things basically bring more trust. And when we are implementing any platform to our customer, we are making sure this layer is also getting piled up with them, and where we are doing it small bit for their POC in for some one product or one tower for them, and then it is scaling further actually by proving with these factors what I have just mentioned about it.
So, picking Vikul, Richa, your point of view, it eventually becomes validation is more of a problem versus code generation, right?
Yes.
And to kind of hear Nagendra, your thought, right, is that we see that the validation and trusting the whole agent and the evidence is now becoming how do you build that explainability? Of course, evidence and test result is one thing, but I keep hearing from the customer, hey, your model, how do I trust your model? Why? I mean, and the same question we ask them, right? Why do we trust your model? So what that frameworks looks like, Nagendra and Mhahesh, would love to have your point of view as well.
Sure. Maybe I had to just go back the example that I gave to bring everybody on the same page, right? Many of you would have followed this OpenAI Hugging Face incident, right? Which was completely unintended, right? Where an OpenAI agent, in the urge to solve the problem, right, which was completely isolated, right? It was not actually exposed to the internet, but it found a way to break out of the isolation, right? And then got into Hugging Face infrastructure, which was discovered during a cyber capability evaluation, right? That's one extreme where, like, I would call this as a watershed moment for us as an industry and AI in specific, on how agent can go rogue, which is completely unintended. And that's a critical part of what we are talking about. How do you test those agents, right? The second example that I also want to quote is the Surge AI example, right? Where they had actually conducted a benchmarking exercise uh, for a more of a simulated company, which actually had all the different departments and performed certain actions. What they also figured out is the best of the best models that they had was able to actually achieve almost around 35-36% accuracy with respect to end to end. Now that leads us to the question of how do you ensure, right? And again, this is not something which is like one time activity, right? And how do you make sure that you bring in that continuous framework that allows you to actually go through the agent's behavior in the real time on almost every minute basis, right? Where you need to have autonomous that actually goes to the continuous validation of their decisions, policy adherence, tool usage, especially, right? And what are the prohibited actions? And finally, the final state. And all of this is an opportunity. While I don't think there is a straight answer to it, okay, you're going to create something. What eventually my hypothesis is every organization will start building their own governance framework focusing on these components, which is like continuous validation of the decisions made by the agents, policy adherence, or it could be tool usage, what are the prohibited actions. And it's a continuous, I would say, input that will have to be fed in, and probably you might have agents even to actually perform these activities, because humans cannot be actually doing 24/7, and this requires, because agents work 24/7, you need to keep a tab on them on every second basis, right? So my answer to this is all of this will have to be done in an automated way with a focus on these aspects with respect to bringing the continuous validation of the decisions that the agents are taking, policy adherence that they are supposed to, tool usages, prohibited actions, and the final state.
Sudhir, I have
Yeah, go on, Vikul.
so I think a couple of things. You talked about um, assurance and explainability, the trust aspect of it, right? So explainability, I think, is not rocket science anymore, right? A lot of models lend themselves to be explainable, and we just have to use the right libraries to extract that information and provide it from an audit perspective. That is number one. Number two, from an assurance perspective, there's a very common industry concept as LLM, especially for LLMs, LLM as a judge, right? Like you have looked at one LLM and that's the one you have defaulted to, but then at the same time you run it through another LLM or another two LLMs and then compare the results and see how big the variance is. And when the variance becomes very big, that's where you bring in like further human in the loop and so on. So that's the second aspect, LLM as a judge. Third is, again, like how fast things are moving, the metrics we look for, right? Like whether it is rogue score or whether it's something else. There are so many metrics out there. What we have done is, at least from a quality AI perspective, we've grouped them under truth, evidence, clarity, and auditability, right? And that way we combine, we give a truth score, we give a clarity score, we give an evidence score, and we give an auditability score, so that they don't have to worry about 40 different scores, whether they understand rogue score or whether they understand something else. It doesn't matter. We give them a percentage, like how much you can trust it, how much can you, how much is the evidence there. And from a go no go decisions perspective, it looks at that weightage and makes decision, right? And if someone says break it down even further, we say think of a pyramid with 2 layers. When we talk about AI assurance, we talk about, do we have the right building blocks for AI? Is the data right? Is it balanced? Does it lend itself to be biased? So that is the data there. Then the second question is, did we build the AI right? Do we have the right model, right? So that is the second layer. And there are many metrics at that layer. Then the third layer is, did we build the right AI? Is it delivering the right outcomes? Is it performing at the right level? Is it even giving the right usability aspect of things? And the last layer is, do we have the right outcomes from this AI? Yes, it's usable. Everyone likes it. But are we getting the business outcome? The business outcome will be simple, right? Better customer engagement, better CSAT score or something. Is it getting the outcomes? So we tell the customers to focus on these 4 layers. And that's what is the foundation for our AI assurance methodology for us.
Oh, I wish to go on and talk more about it, but I think given we are right on time, I have last question, and I would request to keep it in few lines, because that's a very, I think it's an odd question, but it is an important one, right? And is given what we see around us, where do you see enterprise QE practice moving and reshaping in next 3 years? Of course, 3 years is too long to think about, but given that, I would start with Dror real quick. What's your view on that?
So 3 years is a big, it's a long time. So let's talk about 6 months. But look, to be honest, I don't think that QE will be a testing function anymore. In all of my conferences, I'm speaking about the fact that QE is going up the ladder. In every organization, there's going to be chief quality officer that has FDEs that are implementing AI for QE, which means how can I use AI to verify faster? But there's going to be trust engineers that are going to do QE for AI. And that chief quality officer, as Vikul mentioned, owns the metrics, but there is one metrics that it needs to own. How the CEO gets the confidence at the enterprise level, that trust index that says, is the agent is working, are the workflows are working, did I or did I not dilute the AI backwards in every release? Okay, at the end of the day, one sentence. The mandate of the QE will be not to give confidence that they release software to production. That's what we did for decades. But the mission will be that we need to give to the enterprise the confidence that they can actually delegate decision to autonomous systems and to the machines. That's a fundamental change in the way that we're going to be. And that chief quality officer and the trust engineer, that's the future of the profession. Okay? Everybody will become trust engineers. That's
super.
6 months.
So sorry to cut you off, but yeah, Mhahesh, quick one from you. We've got exactly 2 minutes.
you kind of bring back the old view of QE becoming the bottleneck at the end, is it? 2 minutes left, and we finish the execution fast. See, again, I concur what Dror was saying, right? Again, 3 years is a long time. Things that are changing now, and if you see how it has translated in the last year itself, the pace at which how we are moving is something that we never expected it to be. It also shifts on top of what Dror added, right? You also have to look at what it actually means to people on the ground as well, right? The traditional model always meant that the heavy load was done by the junior layer at the bottom of the pyramid. That was also kind of the apprentice model, where they did the hard work, they learned how the system works, and when agents are actually picking up and running this heavy load, that apprentice model and the training model actually goes away as well, right? That's a fundamental change that we have to understand and enable in the organization on what are we going to do with the people on the ground. How do we enable them? And rather than pyramid structure, I think the new structure will be more of a diamond with fewer, more senior people at the top, with a platform or an agentic or an AI model that allows them to get to their outputs faster. I will leave it there.
Super. Thank you, Mhahesh. Nagendra.
Yep. Maybe I'll keep it simple. Uh, I will take a bit of a tangential view here. But I know a lot of things are changing. Assume that the AI works. When I say AI, the economics of AI, I have no doubt the technology works, but the economics of AI, if it proves just like cloud, I can make this bet saying that if the last decade was about bringing automation to bring in the speed, the next decade will be all about engineering trust, right? All of us emphasize, right? And this is where quality engineering will become more strategic than ever. That's my strong belief, right? And especially if software becomes a way of life, and if AI is an integral part of it, uh, cannot afford to fail, and that's where the quality will get all the focus. And I'm very confident that you will see a lot of demand now, maybe not the traditional way of testing, but people who will be able to use AI to become more efficient and also have the skills to test the quality of AI. And that's the kind of people that will be actually in demand in the coming days.
Super. Richa.
Yeah, so honestly, I think the biggest change is that what we may stop calling it as testing. Okay. And the QA engineer will become the person who defines what good looks like, what risk is acceptable, and what agent are allowed to do. And so I don't see QA disappearing actually in this all process. I see QA moving up the value chain from test execution to you can say quality intelligence or the risk orchestration. So means we will stop asking the question, have we completed the testing? To does we have enough evidence to trust this release? That is what my thought
So
around
we are
it.
talking next year as well.
Yeah, means
Yeah. Cool, Vikul.
I have the
Last
handicap
comment.
of going last. All words of wisdom have already been shared by my fellow panelists. I do agree with almost everyone, right? Like, if I had the keys to the kingdom, I will just remove the word testing and QA completely, because testing as it stands today will not survive as we move forward. It'll morph, like Richa said. I would call it trust engineering function, the practice itself. And I will further, because I have the keys to the kingdom, I'll call it continuous trust engineering.
trust.
That's where we are headed, right? I don't have SDETs, I don't have manual engineers, I don't have SREs. Everything has an AI element to it from a new job function. Dror talked about how QA will move beyond a phase before release, right? Like, I do agree with it. But then what is that we are going to be responsible, and what are we not going to be responsible for? I can write in blood that most of the usual work we are doing today, which is repeatable, whether it is requirement analysis, whether it is test design, whether it is data preparation, test creation, test automation, executioning, triaging, will go the autonomous route. And the reason I feel confidence is I see what TestMu is doing, I see what other platforms are doing, and I know what we are doing. We are moving towards a fully agentic, repeatable work. So what will we do? What will be the continuous trust engineering team do? They will focus more on system intent, risk modeling, evaluation, governance, and they'll be the people, like Dror said, who identify whether you can trust to do that. I think that's at a high level. I think we all said the same thing, but in different ways. So I'm just summarizing most of the points everyone has.
Super. I'll promise the next one will keep it for 90 minutes. This panel needs that kind of timing. But Dror, Mhahesh, Richa, Nagendra, Vikul, thank you so much. Truly appreciate nights. My agentic vocabulary has doubled today. So team, let's continue the conversation on social media. Don't forget to tag us #TestMuCon. Share your learnings from the session. And until next time, thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sudhir. Thank you.
Bye. See you.
Bye.